marriage is useless when the goal is pure freedom. Marriage will actually constrain you.
Once you're married, you're kind of on the hook. To get divorced in the West is so expensive, and it's just such a pain.
Is this model that we have built here under this 200 years or so, is this good enough? Or should we find another model?
Because now we have access to this ginormous dating pool. We can be dating people from anywhere. As Markus pointed out, 200 years ago, I would only be able to date maybe within 50 miles.
Something is definitely coming next to replace this current thing that we have, and this current thing replaced something that came before it.
But who the hell says that this is the final form of it? Who says that we need to have these core families anyway?
Hi everybody, welcome back to I Wish You Knew. Today's guest is a phenomenal expert, a futurist, and a guy who's done more things that I can shake a stick at in life. Markku, let me get this right. So you're a knight of Finland, although you don't like to talk about it because you're modest, and I get it. You ran the Dubai Future Academy. You are a chair of UNESCO for planetary futures. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Planetary Futures. You're a member of the Club of Rome, and probably about 50 billion other things that you haven't really shared with us yet. And you're joining us today for the I Wish You Knew podcast to talk about the future of relationships. So very excited to have you. Thank you for joining us, Markku.
Very excited to be a part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And on top of that, you're also a professor at the University of Turku, and you're teaching future studies, right?
Right.
Wonderful. Before we get into the episode, today's sponsor is Rugged Legacy Grooming Supply. They have fantastic grooming products for men and women. Highly suggest that you check them out and look as good as Markku and Adam, which are both wonderful. So let's get right into this. Conversations about relationships. Man, that's like the most actuating and pressing topic that we have right now. You're in Finland right now, right?
Right.
Beautiful. Cold, sunny. What are relationships like in Finland amongst probably the younger generations? Are you seeing like there's been changes in the last maybe decade or so in the way that relationships are perceived?
Well, hope they are not as cold as our weather right now, but, I don't know if there is any correlation. Probably the correlation that comes from sometimes people feeling that we are more like an introverts rather than extroverts, so and hard to describe your feelings, and we are not very much of the oral culture anyway. But if we think about the changes that hasn't been taking place, I think Finland is following the same suit as in many other places, namely that the relationships are becoming more sort of I wouldn't say random, but they are based on rather light bonds than strong bonds, and that is certainly true when I look at my sons, which are about 30 years now. But so that's something that has happened over the time and over the years, and I think it has to do a lot with the general experiences in life these days, which is that we are splitting our time into ever more components, so to say, and that makes the experience of life very different to what it perhaps was before the times of the internet, leave alone the times of the other modern communication tools.
Mm-hmm. Sounds very similar over here in the United States. What we're experiencing is that a lot of the young people are doing two things with their relationships. One is that partners are a lot more disposable. So you just trade them out for another one. Every 7 to 12 months, even if they get into relationships, they're swapping out for a different partner. And what we're seeing is that seems to indicate they're bonding more through like dopamine, for example. They're binging on each other as commodities or as objects almost, instead of connecting human to human. It sounds like that's what you're experiencing over there. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, I think that's something, definitely. Although I would be a bit cautious of saying, is this a kind of a I would say, kind of a fundamental change. On the one hand, one part of me says that, well, in a way, they are always a bit like a trends that goes up and goes down. But as I was referring to the fact that there is also some other things that are changing, and the relationship part is one part of our life, significant, yes, but there is so much more into that. So probably this is just a reflection of the wider changes of the world, and as I said, this is happening everywhere. The interesting, when I see it from that perspective, one of the things that I've been pondering is that how long into the future we will have a family, a core family as a unit. What do you think, Adam? Is this such a fundamental change that it will actually happen, kind of have an effect on this kind of fundamental institution of our modern society?
Fantastic question. I know that right now in the United States, we're seeing a huge shift where children are not being brought into the world in a core married family much anymore. And they're certainly not being raised with much of that anymore. It's become much more the norm for sometimes blended families, sometimes just a scattering effect. Sometimes people simply are electing to become single more and more. Our divorce rates are going down, but that's because the marriage rate is going down, for example. So we are definitely seeing a shift away from not only the core family, but also the extended family over here. I'm curious, do you think that that is a trend that might continue? Because one thing I love about your work is you don't just sit there and just throw darts at the board and hope that you guess something right. You talk about how the future is something you can measure and you can predict a bit. There are trends you can follow, and you have wonderful systems for following the future. What do you think? What do you believe is most likely? Do you think that family trend is going to continue to decline, or might it shift? Might it change into something new that we haven't seen before?
Yeah, well, my kind of argument is something like this. Actually, the type of the core idea of the core family as we know it is probably something like 200 years old. I mean, even of course before that time there were family and marriages and everything, but it was a very different kind of a community in which people were part. Most people, and that again was very different to our idea of the core family. So essentially, our way of having a core family has really become a part of the modernization, because it's been a very effective unit of production, if you would, or consumption, if you put it that way. Now, what would make the change is the question now. That what would actually kind of trigger the change that is so fundamental that this core family simply ceases to exist, and what would come instead? I think we have to think in this way. Something needs to come instead. It doesn't just that this core family thing dissolves and nothing comes to replace it. There is certainly something which is coming. And my idea is that, well, actually we see already the signals of that, although they are not very, very strong as yet, but I think we are seeing that. And that is that, well, if you think about how most of the people get coupled or used to get coupled, they were most of them coming from the same kind of circumstances, same kind of social classes. So the background was usually quite the same. That was a norm. Now we probably see something different, because when people are growing up, they start to show more of their individual features. And then they can be connected not in the ways that, where did you happen to be born and what type of the family you happened to be born. But but the decisive factors start to be, your value system, your preferences, your kind of individual values. And that could be something that actually kind of a ties in very different kind of a network that we had seen, because most of our networks today are still based either from our family background or our professional background.
In the future of marriage, you are still going to need to look, feel, and smell good, which means attracting a partner through the right chemicals. The right chemicals such as you might find in Rugged Legacy. Now, not bad chemicals that are going to destroy your body, but healthy, natural substances that are going to make you very appealing now and well into the future. Make sure you pick up Rugged Legacy grooming supplies.
I got to say, I've really noticed that the vetting patterns between the younger generations have significantly changed. And this is something that you teach a lot about, Adam. You specifically teach about how to vet people for proper attachment through things like principles, through things like values, because now we have access to this ginormous dating pool, right? We can be dating people from anywhere, right? You know, you can be dating people from across the country that you meet online. You can be dating people from other parts of the world, and the world has gotten significantly smaller because not only are they accessible through digital media, but they're also accessible through things like flights. I mean, I can, go visit Markku in 12 hours. We could be drinking beer and in Helsinki, and after that, I could be visiting somebody in China the next day. So the world has gotten smaller. Our pool has gotten larger, but our knowledge experience base has also shrunk because, as Marcus pointed out, 200 years ago, like, I would only be able to date maybe within 50 miles. Like 50 miles would take me 3 days to travel, right? That's a long distance relationship. And that's like if I have a nice, high-end horse. If I have some old stinky donkey, that's even worse. So I also had this vast amount of experience available to me through the community. My grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, crazy alcoholic Uncle Bob, that type of thing. Like it's very present. Nowadays, our inner world has shrunk, in many ways replaced by digital media, by content creators like yourselves and Markku. Sure. Markku being a content creator himself, he's also educating on the future. So it's almost like these positions of authority have now been shifted, and our pool is huge. What do you think about that?
Well, as you said there, you don't want an old stinky donkey. In the old days, you might have had to marry an old stinky donkey.
I would try to avoid it.
Right. Nowadays, you can go on an app and you can find the prettiest
donkey
or handsomest donkey that you can find. But you can continuously search and search and search for a physical upgrade to the person that you're currently with. So, Tinder and all the different dating apps are almost like Amazon for partners at this point, here in the United States especially. We've gone that direction. And something that Markku said that captured my attention a moment ago was, something is definitely coming next to replace this current thing that we have, and this current thing replaced something that came before it. So I'm curious, Markku, what trends do you believe are going to shape family structures or partnering structures over maybe the next 50 years? Are you seeing anything in that?
And I would like to add to that question first. If you can, Markku, how old are you?
I have to think. 62.
62. So the reason I'm asking, and aside from the fact that I've always been curious, and I always, I always think that you're like the perfect, experienced, perfect stereotype for somebody who's actually so immersed into understanding the future that you're actually able to bring together what the past was and your experience in the pre-digital age and actually project it forward. One thing that Markku has is a book named Patterns of the Future. I love that book because it talks specifically about patterns. Everybody, by the way, the book is linked below, so go check it out. It's fantastic. Patterns of the Future is built around the idea that there is repeatability to the past, but it's now adjusted with vectors inside the actual concept of future building. And future is not singular. Future is futures. That is plural. So I would love to know, hopefully I get an A based on that review, Markku. So, so basically what I would love to know is not only what are the trends that are going to be carrying us forward in our relationships, but what were these origins of these trends, Markku? What is it that you've experienced in your past that makes you project them forward as a pattern?
Right, very good question, actually. For my way of looking at things is that that we are indeed moving into these 40 to 60 years long spells, in our economics, in our society, in our technology, and in our politics. And but inside those waves, and I'm now counting that we are on the 6 of these waves, there are always some sort of key forces that affect to the society and all those other sectors. And those are the ones that either has to do with how we are running our life, or how we actually either communicate or produce energy. And these have been now kind of a shifting dramatically. We're still in the beginning of that. But what we see is that that the life in this planet is actually quite fundamentally shifting, because a lot of those issues are not just happening because there is a new trends coming along. A lot of those things are changing because we simply have understood that there are new needs that we have to be meeting. Now, one of these needs that we totally have been missing, according to my judgment, is that the fact that we are now urbanized, and this has happened rather fast. When you have an urbanized society, you have a lot of alienation. You have a people that are actually missing their networks, their friends, because as you rightfully say, Andrey, you know, people are not just, you know, living in their village from the beginning to an end. You know, they are going around everywhere, and usually they are moving, and at some point they also miss a lot of their sort of normal sort of spatial connections, and they need to be replaced with the new ones. But this is not an easy process, and Adam, of course, knows this very, very well. Because once you start to use Tinder and all those things, okay, that's fine. There's a great access to that, but these people that you're gonna meet there might have a widely different kind of a background where you come from, and so there is a very new kind of a contested field in a way that you have to be dealing with. But I believe strongly that we start to build more on these weak bonds rather than the strong bonds, and that is because it's a human desire in us. There is also the other side of it, which you are teaching, Adam, which is that, hey, come on, guys. In the relationship, there are some fundamentals that we need to understand that makes a relationship working. And I'm very much agreeing what you say about those things. You know, starting that if men cannot say what they cannot express themselves clearly what they want, or if they sort of, or if a woman cannot trust the man, yeah. And they cannot solve the conflict together, those kinds of things. Of course it can. My point is just that this is becoming actually increasingly difficult, just because we have that diversity that asks us a lot more to build this kind of a stabilized relationship. That's why we might take quite often the easy way, which is that we go for one and then it doesn't work, but we don't bind ourselves too closely, and then we move to the next one. And that is not only reflection of the romantic relationship, but it's also a reflection of our relationship altogether in this life, which are becoming less strong, but more diverse and more abundant.
I hear you. A lot of these trends, I believe there's two different kinds of trends, and you as the futurist, I'd love to hear if I'm right or wrong on this, but there seem to be two different trends. One is a trend of progression, change, improvement, growth, technology changing, or people moving around, patterns that are not right or wrong. They're simply patterns that change and carry us forward, and we have to adapt into. It seems like there's a second set of trends, though, that brokenness that needs to be healed, basic biological truths, our biochemistry that we stray away from. Some of these deeper relationships, going in for the weaker bonds, don't satisfy us biochemically as much. We don't get the serotonin, the oxytocin. We don't get those connections. I don't think that we can deny them. I don't believe that we can. So I think we need to keep continuously tracking those and coming back to them. Lean into the good trends, or the ones that we can't deny, and the changes, but make sure that we're tracking those additional ones. And the reason I think that I'm correct in that is I run a private mentorship group for people who come in and their bonds have been broken for most of their life. They've lost those connections. They never learned the direct communication skills. They never learned how to properly filter for compatibility in relationships. They've never learned how to speak their needs in a way that's measurable so they can be understood by others. And when I work with them over the course of maybe a year inside that mentorship program and give them those skills, I do see them reverse the negative trends, the temporary trends, as they improve their biochemistry. Now, their relationships may look very different. Some of them choose to go into a more of a traditional coupling marriage sort of situation and have children. Some of them may choose a polyamorous structure. Some of them may simply choose to be single for quite a long time and invest in friendships. So there's not one perfect answer, but they are obeying the biochemistry needs that they have in a new way. What do you think? Am I correct? Am I wrong that there are two different sets of trends?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I wanted to say as a response, I think you were, pretty much the picture is correct. But one thing which is really, really fundamental is that we are built as nomads genetically and also psychologically, and then you think about these paradoxes in which we are living, which is that we are getting stuck in the cities, and where our expression of the nomadism, and I don't mean the nomadism what was there 300 or 500 years ago. I'm referring back to the nomadism before the Ice Age and 10,000 years ago, and there is a long track there. But because it was a long and consistent kind of a evolution, we still carry that. And a lot of the pain and anxiety I believe we have comes also partly from that, even though it's hard to sort of to pinpoint, is that we are built to move. And if we are too much stuck in our lives or in our spatial system, so to say, we start to feel that. We don't feel good about it. I mean, this is my kind of a cultural anthropologist hat right now, but I kind of feel that there is some truth in that. What do you think?
I think this is a long-standing debate a bit that Andrey and I have had about how much humans are meant to be settled in one place, maybe on a farm, the agricultural revolution of 12,000 years ago, and how much people are meant to move. And I wonder a bit, Andrey, what your take on this is. Maybe it's not even so much moving or not moving. Maybe it's having the structures around you as you do that moving. What are your thoughts?
There's something that we need to understand about the current generational shift, and that is there is now a complete transformation of the value systems that we have. And as a consequence, we are trapped in several feelings that are quite novel to us as a community. Fear, loneliness, right, and doubt. All of those things are very new to our society because everything that was supposed to give us comfort, religion, tradition, even the community through which we could have been part of for many generations, all of that is gone. And now the trust in the systems that are left over is also now gone. So many people in my generation, in kind of the younger millennials, many people, even more people in Generation Z, are actually experiencing this complete breaking of trust, and they're feeling lonely, scared, and just full of doubts about everything. it's possible that that is an indication that we are actually supposed to be trying to absorb new information, that we're supposed to move away from this, maybe not even physically, but, societally, spiritually, and go find new ways of doing things, new pastures, kind of new ideas. And that's what's kind of the inner calling inside of us, is calling us towards that nomadic exploration. I don't think we need to move physically from the same spot. A lot of people actually desire that stability of having a hub, but they want to be able to be exploring and getting new stimulation in. Now, one thing that I think we also need at the same time is to have a tribe, because the idea of nomadicism was exactly that. You're supposed to have a tribe with which you're moving. Is that correct, Markku?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
if we're supposed to have a tribe. Right now we're trying to figure out how to build a tribe in a completely broken world. Broken doesn't necessarily mean bad. Broken can also mean different. It could also mean full of opportunities, full of areas into which you can step in with responsibility and fulfill yourself in creating something new. And now we're learning how to build these new tribes and go somewhere. Mm-hmm. So where is it that we're going is the new question.
Well, and that tracks with attachment theory, which says that when a culture gets more and more broken, if you will, if people are not able to meet each other's needs, and children are born into patterns and systems where they will not be supported, and they will not have shared resources. They will have to fight for resources. They will have to go discover their own resources because their parents won't even share them with them. And there will be no quarter given, no care given. Then we start to develop these attachment issues, which disconnect us from other people. Our biochemistry changes. We even see the receptors, the hormone receptors in our brains begin to shift. With the work of Dr. Sue Carter with vasopressin and oxytocin bonding, she's proved that. So we are definitely at this moment in a massive shift that our brains are designed to accommodate for, but we're not necessarily going to be happy in. So I am curious what future trends could shift to bring us to a place where we are biochemically healthy again. Markku, are you seeing any trends or any changes, or do you have any eyes on the sky kind of futurist kind of moment? Are you seeing any positive trends where people might be finding healthier adaptations, where we are in some way coming back to that? Or do you see it on the horizon for us?
Well, what I do see is that there is there is a certain search for the meaning right now that I haven't registered previously so strongly. You just look at the discussions, you look at the books that are published, you look at the way people are treating these issues around the meaning in different channels, and it's steaming, and it's steaming for the good reason. It's steaming because I think that previously we easily adopted the meanings, again, from the sources that were close to us, our family origins, everything that was kind of ready-made there. But that's not enough anymore. Either there is not enough family background, or you want to choose yourself. And that constitutes a very different kind of view, how to look at the world, and what do you prefer in that world. I think the question is very good. What is my purpose? What is the meaning of living here? Because if you search that question, you start to look at, okay, it cannot be just, to have a decent job and, to have a decent wife or man and the kids and the stuff. This is not anymore appealing at all. I mean, you still need some of those things. Yes, not all of them, some of those things, yes. But you need that meaning. And nobody can offer that anymore, in the sense, as you were saying, Andrey, in the sense religion gave us the meaning. Well, yeah, we are part of God. And you didn't even have to work on that. You just took what your parents and grandparents were thinking about that and adopted to that type of kind of a belief system. And that was it. But that doesn't happen anymore. So that is the fundamental change. And that also builds, again, much more meaningful relationship, I believe, as we move towards the future, because that's what people are also looking for.
So a lot of the trends that are moving us forward are going to be man's search for meaning instead of man's search for survival from here on out, is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're also living in this strange world where for the last 100 years, maybe 150 years, we questioned everything. Everybody questioned and pushed every boundary known to man. You know, we pushed against religion, government structures, societal norms, biology, through medication, through the exploration of even illicit substances and many other things. Gender, right? The idea of relationships, the ideas of traditional marriage, everything has now been shifted. And many things that were deemed to be completely immovable turned out to be very much movable, right? And when I was growing up, you know, I had the understanding that the only way we could have any type of success was if, you know, we as men would enter into the corporate world and, you know, wear nice suits and we would have to go and climb the hierarchy and get good at corporate something or other. And I went down that path. And then there was a point where, you know, I was running a consulting practice, and then through a family connection I had a chance to work with Jordan Peterson, and then I said, this is a waste of time. I don't ever have to wear a suit anymore. I don't need an office. I can make more money, you know, doing this than I've ever made. And I don't have to follow this narrative. And there's so many people who broke out of that mentality saying, hey, I can be this, I can be this. You know, Adam, you broke out of the therapy space by becoming a creator. Markku, I mean, you're breaking out of your traditional space by becoming a creator. So it seems like we're always questioning everything, and turns out most things we were taught aren't really true. So what really is true is maybe a search for truth just as much as meaning, including in relationships, right? Traditional marriage is...
I see very close connection between the truth and the meaning.
Right.
Search for truth and for meaning. I want to say one more thing about this, because I think particularly the younger generation sees a lot of destruction around right now. I mean, if you look at the geopolitics, if you look at the climate change, all those issues that have become so forcefully into the picture. So the whole narrative basically have changed from okay, let's move on, let's progress. We're gonna reach more. We're gonna build more. We're gonna be wealthier. You know,
we like more. More is good.
Yeah.
More. Everything faster.
Correct.
Cooler. That's like the way that the world works now.
Yeah.
You got it. Yes. So now when that is changing, that narrative, there is instead this question: what makes really sense? Why things are not working the way they should? So there is a much more sort of a critique around and sincere questioning. And you know, is this model that we have built here under this 200 years or so, is this good enough? Or should we find another model that's a part of that search? And that also kind of steers, I believe, increasingly, also the type of the relationship you want to build.
But then are we not addicted to just breaking things? We've been breaking things for like 150 years. I mean, it's really funny because for me, you know, as a Russian by background, my great-grandparents broke the imperial system. My parents and my grandparents broke the Soviet system. And now, basically, everybody's just breaking systems left, right, and center. You know, there's all this breaking of marriages and relationships and standards and working patterns. Like, are we just addicted to breaking things over and over again? And as, you know, I'm kind of curious what you think, Markku and Adam. is there a point where we should stop? Is there a point where you guys just say, like, calm down?
Well, I've got 5 kids of my own, and kids are much the same. Children will break every system they can, every rule they can, and that's their way of understanding how things work. It's their way of understanding consistency.
What does this button do?
Well, yeah, it actually makes them happy when they find something that can't be broken, and then when they understand it, because now, they put a marker there and say, now my world makes a little more sense. And they want a number of markers that make sense, not arbitrary rules to follow, but things that make practical sense to them, because then they can build a system.
So, Markku, what things are there, based on your experience as a futurist, your wealth of knowledge, your personal experience, what things should not be broken? What should we not mess with?
Ooh, for the future.
For the future, right? There have to be limits. There have to be rules. What are these rules?
I think there are basically 2 rules, 2 rules only, that kind of reside over the others. The one rule is that we as human beings, we need freedom. If we cannot have freedom, whatever form of oppression there comes, and there are many, as we know, that's always kind of a reducing ourselves as human beings. And even if this is kind of a general accepted, we know very well that a huge part of the world does not respect that type of rule or norm for freedom. The other part of that story is, of course, responsibility. So we need people that are genuinely responsible. What does that mean? That not only means that you generally try to keep your commitments, but it's an essential part of it. But it's actually a much more fundamental thing, which is that if you're making your own rules sort of every day anew, then you need to think like philosopher Immanuel Kant, that if you would raise these as a general rule, that you are accepted to change the way you deal with the rules or the way you deal with your responsibility every day, the world would be in a total chaos. Now, I think that a lot of the problems that we have in this world, that we are not really following those 2 fundamentals, and we have a little bit lost touch what they really truly mean in our society. And that's why, if you take the family traditions, for instance, I mean, who says that we need to have these core families anyway? I mean, that's just that's the pattern that comes from the past. This is the way that we bond. But who the hell says that this is the final form of it,
What do you think will happen instead, right? So what do we have that could be better for us psychologically than what Adam sells? Loving, committed relationships with children. Like, you're selling a very, traditional, original product. It's just as long. It's been around just as long as the potato peeler. It hasn't changed much since it got invented 500 years ago. But why does the potato peeler need to change? We've not ultimately reached its best form. Same thing with marriage, right? Do we really need to come up with something better? Like, I can't even imagine what that could look like. What do you think?
I remember I married about 2 years ago, my second marriage, and I had a friend who said to me that, "Why did you marry? What is this point of marriage?" Well, this guy is even older than me, so he's not the representation of the young generation.
Okay.
And it was kind of striking me. Yeah, you can really think that way. Why the hell? What was the point? Of course, there were the reasons why I had to, but I understood also that, you can completely think otherwise. And that doesn't take, by the way, any of the Adam's advice about the good relationship, whether you're married or not. You still need to work on those things. So it doesn't take away that. But what it does is actually that getting married is an easy way because, then there's an institution that, tells them now you're officially a couple.
But does it keep you safe, though? Doesn't marriage keep you safe? Because here's the thing, right? Once you're married, you're kind of on the hook. Like to get divorced in the West is so expensive. And it's just such a pain. Like it isn't a see you later, goodbye. Like it is actually a legitimate thing. And a lot of times the purpose of marriage is to prevent you from frankly running off when you're just being dumb, like to kind of give you these guardrails to not, mess up somebody who's chosen to trust you, especially for women, there's a big component of attachment that does form with, sexual bonds and marriage and whatnot. But also if you have kids, as a dude, you don't just take off and disappear and, run off with the next, pretty little thing. And it's supposed to kind of keep you that collective family together for the sake of all of its members. Like, is that not a protective element, do you guys think?
Well, you said something in there that marriage is supposed to stop you from running off and being stupid. And to Markku's point, I fully agree that we need to examine, why do we have marriage? Why does it exist? We shouldn't just take it and say, well, everyone gets married, you have to get married. No,
because it's a potato peeler.
Yeah, and questioning it, like Markku said, is perfect, because if it is true, if it is truly a good thing for us, then the answers will come to us and we will say, oh, this is what marriage does for us. This is why it's good. Or we will say, oh, this is stupid. This is foolish. So let's examine, what is the purpose of marriage?
What questions do we need to ask to determine that marriage is fundamentally good?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think marriage is useless when
this is off-brand. I will slap you.
I know. No, I think marriage is useless. Marriage is useless when the goal is pure freedom. If the goal is pure self, if the goal is pure pleasure, I think that marriage is useless. Marriage will actually constrain you. What Markku talked about there a moment ago was a delicate balance between freedom but also consistency. That's essentially what he was talking about a moment, his two rules. We must carefully walk this balance between freedom for the individual, but consistency in our rules and our approach. So marriage, I think, must provide both. It is useless if it goes in either direction. If it is purely freedom,
Markku said responsibility, not consistency. And consistency, are they?
Well, they are the same thing. He said you must wake up and you must live to similar principles daily so that there is not chaos. Responsibility, consistency. Yes, this is what marriage must provide. It is essentially the signing of a contract between two people who are going to found a business together. That is what marriage ultimately is.
Adam, you worked with me without a contract for 6 months.
Sure.
How did you even justify that?
But we weren't forming a business together. We were working together. Yeah. If it was the same business, it's very different. But think of this. Marriage is designed to help two individuals build something together. That's what it must be. If it's two people having fun together, a friend is right to ask, why would you get married? You're running a huge risk. You're having fun, but when you're done having fun, you're tied down. The consequences are terrible. And to that, it makes perfect sense why your friend would ask that.
And there's a huge community of people who believe that. Right? There's the red pill stage, as we say, do not get married, and unless you absolutely must, because it is something that's going to tie you down. And their argument is that it's going to impact the quality of your relationship.
Sure, but my wife and I, we wanted to have 5 children.
Okay.
We wanted to raise a family system where they could be as much scattered or as close as possible. Hopefully close, but we definitely won't tie them down. Grandchildren, great-grandchildren, family businesses. We wanted to build that. So we united
and built a village.
Yeah, well, we live in a village. But we united to create this system together, and we got married to protect that system. So that, yes, if one of us got temporarily foolish, we wouldn't scatter, but also so that we could signify this unification.
Do you have a prenup?
No.
You don't have a prenup. Markku, you don't have to answer this.
We had nothing when we got together, but if we had, yes, a marriage contract would be. I look, for example, at the old Jewish custom that they do have a marriage contract that then is beautified and held and put on display.
But they have the institution of the Jewish mother. And I've met so many Jewish marshals, and they're fantastic.
Well,
and the best thing they often are at is keeping relationships and negotiating between opposing parties.
And keeping a family together. Yeah, so marriage is not supposed to either be just between two individuals. It's supposed to be a whole system. So to that point, marriage, is it going to be part of our future? I believe it will, but I believe it will have to serve a purpose. And I think that's what the young people are looking at is, does marriage serve a purpose, or are we just having fun? What do you think about that, Andrey?
Yeah.
And Markku?
For me, it's like, I take an example from our financial system. Well, we need banking, but do we need banks?
Bitcoin says no. Go Bitcoin.
So we need relationship, but do we need marriage? I mean, and does the marriage function in the way that it makes a better couple if you are married? Okay, you already raised, one of you, the issue around the safety, and that's true. Yeah, it builds more safety there. Yes, and there is also a lot of legislation, all that, which kind of supports that. So there is a lot of reasoning behind, obviously. But then again, if we go back to my earlier argument, which says that, well, for every decision that you make, every bigger decision you make in your life, you need to see the meaning of it. You need to understand what purpose it serves, and you don't take it for granted. It's not something that you just adopt from the past. You need to work it out for yourself. And that is positive. That is positive of questioning of these fundamentals, because we need to do this. We are living in a very different kind of an era right now, where the human consciousness is expanding, and we're getting a little bit sort of understanding more than we did before. How does this universe really works? And for that we need this critique. Yes, we need this questioning, and particularly when it comes to the very old institutions that we need faith, but do we need religions in the old state? Do we need that? So those are the types of questions that we need to be making, and we are making, and the younger generation is making much more. Even in Finland, you don't have to go just 30, 40 years ago, and you had something like a 90% of the people that were belonging to the Protestant church. But the situation is now quite different. People are kind of designing this relationship, and particularly the younger generation, because they don't see that. What's the sense? Yes, I might have a strong faith, but I don't like it to be canonized in the way the Protestant, church does it. So I want to have my own faith,
I don't want these rules. Less rules is basically the rule of life, it seems. What are some alternatives? Like, what are some specific alternatives to traditional marriage that you think will be viable for us to experiment with in the next, say, 100 years? What is that? Is that open relationships? Is that the thing where you just like cohabitate with somebody? Is it going to be communes? Like, what are we talking about? Practically, like what will that look like? That'll be like the top 3-4 competing models.
I've got a couple ideas, because I've watched. I grew up in California, not far from
I'm
San
so
Francisco.
sorry.
Yeah, don't hold me. But I grew up not far from San Francisco and Silicon Valley and all those big areas. And what I saw was they would discard old ideas. And then they would reinvent them with new names and pretend they had reinvented like the bus or the sailboat, or like random ideas that they would reinvent and not realize they were reinventing something. So what I suspect will happen is we will probably, for example, young people, I get a lot of 20 to 25-year-old women who DM me and say, Adam, we're not going to get married, but how do I make sure that my boyfriend stays with me for our whole life, and that we can have kids and live together and be happy and have a safe structure so that we can rely on it, but not marriage? And they'll ask me that. And I say, well, you've just done is you've invented marriage. So what should it look like to you? I think the young people will throw away marriage, and then they will gradually recreate marriage. I think there will be rules and laws. I think there will be contracts. I think there will be agreements.
I'll be on the blockchain.
I think they're on the blockchain, right? I think that there will be custody arrangements of the children. I think that there will be paternity protection for that. And there's places where if you're not married, you don't have paternity protection. I think that there will be so many agreements that come in that we will reinvent marriage, essentially, in one shape or another. That's what I believe is probably going to happen. What are your thoughts, Markku?
Well, I first want to come back to what I said about the relationship between the freedom and responsibility, because people think that freedom means that you can do absolutely anything. That's bull, basically. That's not what freedom means. This comes back to what I said before about the relationship between the freedom and responsibility, which is the fundamental part of our being, to be a human being, which the being really means. And when I say we need this absolute freedom, I don't mean the freedom that we can do just anything we want. I mean the freedom that allows us to be responsible. And we can only be truly, totally responsible if we are free to choose what we do. And I believe that there is a lot of evidence, a lot of science, a lot of that type of stuff, that once you have that, once you have that freedom, people actually start to act responsibly. But we are not really there. I mean, we act more in this society like this is a one big kindergarten. So kind of a nursery. It's funny. And in the land of freedom, in the United States of America, that is shown particularly clearly. So it's so funny, there's this endless things that you can observe when you come from a Europe, which is quite different in that sense. But anyway, so what I mean is that, I think we are onto the track where I see maybe after 3-4 generations, so 100, 150 years from here, where people are building much more what I call the meaning communities. Very different type of the communities from the ones that we had in the past, tribal or, agricultural villages or stuff. These would be the type of the communities where people are tied by the particular meaning particular purpose, by particular choice of preferences. And that's much stronger tie and much more aligned with this type of the sense of, to be able to express your true being as freedom and as responsibility. And we are moving towards that direction. And that is the replacement of the current system, but it happens slowly. And then, yes, we don't have an institution like this old-fashioned marriage, but we do have people that have devoted to each other, yes, but in the ways that maybe follows this, that what is usually a trap in every relationship almost, is that when the other one forms your source of happiness, that's a very hard load to bear. So then these meaningful relationships, some of them might be strong, some of them might be weaker, but that's much more aligned with the true nature of the human being. I
really like that. And I really like that because that's exactly the trend that we're getting through the digital space. People are actually aggregating and creating communities not based on demographics, not based on their location, but based on their desires, and in many ways, like kind of their biology, their neurology, like what is truly familiar to them, often transgressing often transcending language, often transcending age, often transcending things like cultural differences, and we're creating these vast digital communities, again, hence the creator economy. Both of you guys are doing exactly that. We're creating a digital community, which eventually was going to have to manifest, right? And if I could even pitch the idea of being offered an opportunity to live in a physical community where people share my moral values, where people share my kind of cultural targets, where, you know, I can create a new way of living. Am I going to say no to that? Like, probably I'm going to go say yes. This is fantastic. If I can go hang out with cool people who we're on the same page, we trust each other, and we can kind of live in our own little niche, that could be really cool. That would be really attractive to me, because I would not have to constantly problem solve. Right now, I have to constantly problem solve every day, where there's bombardment of information and alternative viewpoints and, you know, very confrontational and conflicting teachings based on my perspective. And how much of my life do I want to spend doing that? You know, how much of my life do I want to spend always having to protect, defend, argue, etc., as opposed to simply coexist? I am tending to direct myself already in that direction by even forming, you know, Veritas as an entity and all of these creator communities we're building together. And do you think that's going to be kind of a viable relationship dynamic based on biochemistry?
So in psychology, this is something that we talk about. Instead of related families, we talk about intentional families. These are families that form through intention instead of the accident of birth, so to speak, is what we're talking about. The shared values, right? The collected tribe from nowhere. So we have two different systems that work for this, right? One is a disaster, and one is empire building. And it really comes down to the attachment, your ability of each individual to merge and form healthy, structured, loving, trusting relationships within that system. The disastrous system is people that merge under some sort of domineering, controlling leader who takes advantage of the scattered people in order to exploit them. This might be
the oppressive thing that Markku was talking about.
Well, yes,
right?
but even here in the United States, we talk all often about Jonestown, right? Jonestown, where they had a semi-Christian cult that they went and left into South America to get away from the American government, and he structured these hundreds of people, and then he had them all commit suicide at the end because he was going to die, and things like it was a wild structure. Jonestown, but other cults, we have many evil dictators that have throughout history used this system. So there is a bad system of doing this. But then when you look at the way that the city of Rome was founded, the village of Rome was founded, was also by collecting outcasts, collecting different people from everywhere, and pulling them into this tiny village and starting a new village with a shared identity. And the Roman Empire was not, we are Italians. It was, we are Romans, and Roman citizenship was extended all across the empire in a variety of ways. So to be Roman could mean a variety of things, but depending on what sort of shoes you wore and what color you might be and your different features. But to be united as a Roman was a very specific thing. So we have those two different systems. Attachment is what really dictates, is that going to be a healthy, thriving system that becomes an empire where people are gathered in and then share in that intentional family as Romans, or will they be domineered and controlled and harvested, as we see in many different ways? That is, I think, the element of attachment theory in that as well.
So I would love to see an intersection between future studies and your ability to project and in some ways even ask the right questions to influence the future, Markku, and your study of attachment, Adam. How do we build a future or possible futures where good attachment is prevalent? What are these mechanisms that could actually drive us, Markku, based on what you know?
Well, I would start with thinking about the nature of communication. And there, where I feel that where we are lacking most is our capacity to be empathetic. And that is really something that sometimes I get the feeling that, we are actually becoming all the time less and less empathetic. There is even some measurements of that also shows the same kind of a trend. We are becoming less empathetic as a society, even as a civilization. And that is a really worrying fact, because we have a lot of evidence to show that it should be actually the other way around. More information, more access to this and that, that we should become, just because of that, more empathetic, to understand people from very diverse background. But they don't know. And you look at the political scene, it's always, it's going towards the other end. And that is the paradox of modern times. So people are getting more they are like a retreating, not as an act of reflection or meditation, but as an act of selfishness.
And this is directly tied into what we see with the younger generations. Their attachment is getting worse. They are less and less believing that anyone else is going to care for them, less and less believing even that their own parents will provide resources or nurturing. They feel less safe than ever. So I'm wondering if what we're seeing, that reduction in empathy, is actually a reduction in capacity for empathy because they are so fixated on trying to protect themselves. That's why I teach
but who else is protecting them, right? So let's now disaggregate this. So if you're a young person online right now, you are on TikTok, you're on Instagram, you're on YouTube, and just the amount of, frankly, judgment you get on these platforms is still a massive problem. It's getting worse, not better. Yeah. If you are trying to date using digital means, you are on Tinder, you're on Bumble, you're on these apps where you instantly get judged. That is a conflict. That is, it hurts your feelings when you're not actually recognized for who you are. Let's talk about then other aspects of societies. Too many divorces, too many divorced families, the kids who have their feelings hurt by their parents splitting up or whatnot. And just overall, the structures that are supposed to keep us safe are not doing that. So it's like almost everybody's responsibility to take care of themselves. And part of the reason, too, is that the amount of information is going up, but the responsibility of the entities producing and distributing that information is going down. Mm-hmm. You look at Facebook's user policy. It does not bear any responsibility for anything that happens to you. It's a Wild West. Yep. So could that be a big factor in the fact that people just don't trust anything anymore?
Well, what do they trust?
What do they trust? They trust themselves. They trust the community of people they could be potentially building, but that community of people is usually somebody they will find on things like gaming platforms. That's actually some of the biggest community forming entities because they go through challenges together. Sure, it's in the digital space. They tend to...
Maybe Andrei, there is another way of looking at this,
okay.
Which is that they don't even trust themselves. Mm-hmm. And because there is a distrust to your own judgment, you start accordingly to also to not to trust the others in the same as well. And so because the struggle that you have is inside you, and but that takes away the possibility or your capacity to take care of what's going on outside you in the same way, because you are forced to focus on yourself. You are, as you could say, you are busy with yourself. When you are, we know, individually, if we are too busy for ourselves, yes, we keep the world out as much as we can. I can't deal with this now. I have so much things in my mind, and I have to deal with that issue and fears and everything. So that is certainly something that takes, and this chaotic, more complex world just propagates this.
It's too much,
and this is this psychological result of it.
It's too much. There's too much stuff going on, and there's too much information. There's too much pressure. We don't know how to deal with it. So is that why we shut down?
Well, that's one thing. I was having dinner with you the other day, and you were talking about the role of creators, Markku, myself, and yourself, shifting more from not just creating and sharing cool ideas with the world, but becoming curators of, hey, here is my idea. Everybody likes attachment. So people that study attachment, they follow me. Here are ideas that I see adjacent to my ideas, right? Curating so that the people who follow my ideas can understand new ideas. They begin filtering. So, and that's part of this podcast. We've brought Markku on. So the people who follow me and say, okay, I like what Adam says about attachment. I like what he says about relationships. I like this and this. Maybe what Adam can do for me is help me filter some of this noise. So then I bring Markku on and say, Markku's fantastic. He understands future trends. He can help you see your future. And they can say, okay, if Adam vouches for Markku, then I can listen to Markku as well. And they begin weaving that thread of truth throughout their life, because I think too many people are just overwhelmed. They don't understand what their thread is anymore. They're looking for people to help them.
So I really like the way that this conversation is going then, because it's also a great way for us to tie this specific discussion with Markku and to say, if we are to summarize and say that, yes, there is now a destruction of traditional systems, which is simply going to continue. I think we all agree that this trend is not going to stop.
No, yeah.
I think that the trend of increasing information overload is going to also continue. And ultimately, the responsibility is now placed on the individual to source and find a truth that is innate to them and build a community around them. Then what are the core skills that a young person or a person in this future society is going to need to have in order to accomplish this? What do you guys think?
Well, I often talk about on complexity skills as skills, so one of the key skill set of our time. But what does it really mean is that you are able to deal with this chaos, which is the same thing as we need when we go towards the future, which is that we need to deal with the uncertainty. We would like to have, everything ready and packed in a way as our narrative goes about past. You cannot change the past, so the past is packed. But future, what? Chaotic, uncertain, maybe this, maybe that. And we can just, as I say, we can see some patterns, yes, trends, signals, then something I call the invitations, like a calls, but still, even with those kind of little tools that we have, it's still that uncertain. It's our black box, it's our backside that we don't see ourselves. And so with that, we have to be dealing with that, because that's what where we are heading. I mean, this is what we need to be facing anyway. We need to be able to face this uncertainty. And so, and that, which is, by the way, increasing because the complexity of the systems are increasing, which means that there are more and more surprises coming along. So this is the fundamental skill that we need to have in this world, and is so much more than we did. We need to be able to deal with this. So then I come back to what you have been, Adam, saying in some of your interventions, which is that, well, because this is the communication business, but in order to be a good communicator, you need two things. You need to be able to deliver clearly what you want, or what is your intention and all that, but you'll be able to also to listen what the other says. And when you have those two things straight, so when you have been building your capacity to do these two things, to listen and to express, then you are on the track to something where, because most of our lives we are always dealing with other people. This is the hardest part of our life, how to deal with other people. And so so that is something like where which is becoming, in the same way as we have to face this uncertain future, we need to be facing the uncertainty of our relationship. Again, if you have this coercive way of building a setup that makes you feel secure, that's old-fashioned. That's the old-time certainty. That's the old-time safety that you are building. What you really need to be doing is to be still feeling safe, even if there is uncertainty, even if you haven't tied your better part of you by some institutional setup. So this is something that we need to be learning, and this is something that, again, I think we all agree, we see this emerging in younger generations, but it causes a lot of problems, a lot of anxiety, a lot of, it's not an easy transformation. It's a hard one, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, which is that we are becoming better as human beings once we have gone through that.
Right? It's a bravery and a hope that people now need to cultivate within themselves when they wake up and say, even though everything is confusing and a mess, I will figure it out, I will pursue it, and I believe that the world is going to be better for me and the people I care about. And that's a very deep, powerful, and freeing notion. And this, I think, ties back beautifully, Markku, to the idea of freedom and responsibility. I will craft my own freedom, but responsibly, in a way that is not going to transgress against me and ultimately break my attachment. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but you cannot have good attachment if you feel like you are not a good person.
Having broken attachment will make you believe you're not a good person.
So basically, one is a consequence of the other, right? Broken attachment, you don't believe yourself. You're being good. You're actually worthwhile. So in order for you to have self-respect, internal freedom, sovereignty being a core aspect, you have to have some form of good attachment to yourself and to others, right?
Absolutely. And to that key point, attachment, I believe, is the way of the future for people to begin filtering their system, their world, to filter, to make sure you have the right partner. You need to make sure they are capable of forming intimate, loving relationships for life. If to be able to build intentional systems and families, like Markku was talking about, and intentional tribe, you need to understand that the people around you are capable of building that connection. And third, to be able to find the right people to curate or filter or lead, to be able to elevate the proper leaders that align with your values, you need to understand and make sure that they are significantly healthy in their attachment as well, that you don't have a despot, you don't have a domineering tyrant that you lord over everything. We're seeing that right now, red pill circles, young men trying to grow and become masculine, and they wanted to be very much like Andrew Tate and have lots of girlfriends and lots of money and lots of cars, and now all of a sudden he's on trial for human trafficking and for various crimes.
And also, he's interesting enough that he's actually going back and he's saying now he's looking for a different system even for himself.
Yes, and I've seen, as he's been in prison now, he's talking about, he's actually opened now to the idea of marriage. He said, maybe I have been wrong all this time about this foundational piece of human connection.
So it sounds like we have several key pieces here. Like we have, it's almost like you get what you ask for. We wanted the age of responsibility. Now here's the age of responsibility, right? Okay, you guys want to wipe everything out? Let's wipe everything out and start again. What are you going to do about it? So this personal responsibility, the ability to be genuine to self, to hold to your principles, to navigate truth, and to build a community, be either by becoming a part of a community and helping you nurture it, or by building community yourself. That sounds like the skills that will carry us through the 21st century into whatever this new era is. Because ultimately then what's going to happen is that there's going to be probably clusters of, not really ideologies, but models, and they will themselves compete between each other, pulling in members, making cases, kind of going to some form of conflict with each other, just as we've seen the pagan systems and the monotheistic systems compete, as we've seen different government systems compete, as we've seen different societal systems compete. I think that's probably going to now happen now in a relationship sphere, because we are, as humanity, always trying to find that perfect truth. It is an evolutionary mechanism. Just as we've figured out we need to have 2 hands and 2 legs and no tails, then, I think maybe in a way we're psychologically inclined to now figure out the next step. It should be quite fun. I hope I'm around for that. Well, I guess depends if my system wins, because if it doesn't, I'm not so sure. Does that sound right, guys? Because we're kind of at the end of our interview, but I do want to make sure that we have a nice big takeaway, not just for ourselves, but also for our listeners. What do you guys think of kind of like your closing statements on this one?
So I'll go first. I look at a lot of Markku's work because I love it's fascinating, Markku's work. of predicting.
He's a good guy. I like him.
But his work is amazing. So everybody at home, make sure you check out Markku's work for this. But one thing that keeps capturing me is predicting that future, believing that future, seeing those trends. And you don't have to find one future, but you map out all the possible futures with the different trends of what is most likely. And then you adapt into those trends. And I think that what we've defined here today is many of those core trends that people need to lean into and discover. That you will be responsible and you will have freedom, and responsibility comes with that. And at the same time, you need to know who to trust and how to build those relationships. I think that that's a key element. Markku, am I getting that right about your work?
Oh yeah, yeah. Thanks, Adam. And very much also, I would say that the work that you are doing on these attachment issues and relationship is really fundamental. I really think you are at the core of something which really defines us as human beings. So please, listeners, go and check Adam's stuff, because you get the feeling that you really know what you're talking about.
Well, thank you.
That is achievement, to talk about something as complex as relationship, because it's about the most complex thing that we can have in our lives. So, what I think, where we can sort of get the final touch for this discussion that we had, is that not only we are kind of transforming the whole idea of who we are as human beings, but that is also absolutely necessary for the world in which we are living, because we need some planetary healing here, and that always have to come only from one source, which is us human beings. And the good part of the story, and the good news is that we are able to do that, because we have seen this happening in the past as well. We are able to rejuvenate our ways, how we look at the world. We are able to update. We are able, to really to kind of spark up things when it's needed, and that's absolutely amazing thing about the human being. And this is what I truly believe. I also truly believe that sometimes the best way to move forward is to get quite close to complete disaster, and then you start to kind of sense what is truly important. Unfortunately, well, there are quite a lot of people who may start laughing at it, because they are reflecting their own lives, and then, there's some truth in that. So, but the point is that whatever gets us moving is good. Sometimes it's something coming from outside of us. Sometimes it's some sort of an inner necessity. Whatever it is, we need to be. The only thing that we need to be doing is that we need to be sensitive to those signals and try to understand their meaning. And once we do that, then we start to live like a human being, kind of worth of human being and human life, which is that we are recognizing ourselves, we are trusting ourselves, and as we have been talking, we need that trust to ourselves before we can really trust the others as well. And to be able to trust yourself, you need to simply to know yourself a little bit better usually. So that's the way forward. And when you have a good self-recognition, I think we can make much better relationships as well.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. I love this, guys. This was a fantastic conversation. I am very curious to see what the audience thinks, and I would love to see the comments below. So comment your questions. We'll ask Markku to take a look at them. Adam, take a look at them. Jump in and respond. Markku, where do we find you on your social media so that we can continue learning about this together?
Well, I have such a peculiar name that you just type in my name to any of these search engines that you have, and you will certainly find a lot of stuff there. But yeah, I'm in all the channels from YouTube to Instagram to TikTok, and you will find one from those sources and many others as well. So
you will find them all linked below, guys, as well. And you can type in Markku's name. You will find a lot of very fascinating things about Markku. You will find his book. And you have an upcoming book as well, right? You have another book you're writing right now. Is that correct?
Yeah. There is a book that I'm working on, which is about the disruptive futures, which
Amazing.
where I try just to explain why our world looks a little bit disruptive at the moment, and I try to kind of see through that.
I'm eager to dive into that one because that's right up my alley.
I think we might have to do another conversation as soon as that book comes out. We had a chance to read it because it's going to be fun. Awesome. Adam, where do people find you?
I am Adam Lane Smith. You can find me online at adamlanesmith.com. You can find me as @AttachmentAdam on Instagram and YouTube. I am on Twitter as @AdamLaneSmith. You can find me pretty much everywhere talking about attachment and oftentimes sharing Markku's content because I love what he says about the future, and I believe that we are building it together.
Wonderful. And you can find me, guys, at Andrey Korikov on Instagram. And you can also find out more about what we do with content creators at veritascreative.media. Everything is linked below. Check us out, subscribe, and comment. And let's see you guys on the next one.